How is everybody going today? I have a bit of a different video to A, jump on the bandwagon because everyone's curious about these, but B, I'm getting a lot of stupid comments and questions and it's driving me mental. So, if you just came from my other channel where I did another quick shorts based on how popular the previous shorts that I put up has gotten about these Peltier modules, then welcome over to this channel where I actually do more tinkering in electronics, as you can see from all this crap I got over here. I also drink a lot of beer, as I do on my primary channel. Now, these have gotten popular, and I don't know why, but a lot of people don't seem to understand them. They are called Peltier modules, based on the Peltier effect, and there's some dude, probably French, that invented it. You can go and read it on Wikipedia. I'm not going to spill garbage that you can read online, and I'll probably get it wrong anyway. Now, these are essentially heat pumps. If you think about the reverse cycle aircon that you probably have in your house, that is a heat exchanger or a heat pump. So using real metric system units, once the outside temperature is below about 10 degrees Celsius, that's not going to work so well. So at that point, I actually run my oil heater because it essentially costs less money, or seems to cost less money, than trying to use a heat exchanger when there's really not much heat to pull out of the air. Like if you've got 0 is frozen and you've got that little 10-degree headroom, there's not much heat to pull out of the air to pump inside. However, you'd be able to refrigerate your inside really well. You'd freeze to death, but it would work. It's a heat exchanger though. So essentially, if you've got a hot and cold side on this, you apply electricity, it's going to draw heat. Draw heat from one side and emit it out the other. You can't create cold. You can't create heat. It's got to move from one place or another. You can use refrigerant. If you wanted to refrigerate something or freeze something, use refrigerant. And that's using a very different part of physics that I don't really understand. I don't understand any physics really. But essentially, if you've got a refrigerant gas, you move it about, it wants to be frozen, it's going to cool things down. That's my very, very primitive, probably wrong understanding. These don't refrigerate, they cool. So in all your like soda can coolers, in your like little coolers in your car, or your portable 12-volt coolers, they'll be using Peltier modules almost certainly. Some people call it Peltier modules, but I think Peltier is how it's meant to be said. If you want to refrigerate or freeze something, like if you've got your Engel or something like that, that's probably got a Danfoss compressor in it, that's going to be using refrigerant, and that will refrigerate things. So don't comment asking me what spec module you need to freeze X things to -4 degrees. It's not going to work, and I'm starting to get angry at these stupid comments. If you're watching this and you understand that, you're welcome to go and flame these people that are asking stupid questions. Be aware there is sometimes a language barrier, so don't flame them for not necessarily using the right words. But if someone leaves a comment saying, how do I make this, or could you make this for me? Yes, I'll make it for you. The simplest thing I can make will probably cost you like $20,000. This isn't a business where I'm selling things. Go and find a commercial supplier on AliExpress, Alibaba, or something like that. These are Peltier modules. They have limited practical application in these small sizes, but you can make some fun things with them. I use them for different odds and ends. I've actually got 3, but I've lost one somewhere. So I got this smaller one that I've unfortunately rubbed the numbers off, but I roughly remember its spec. I think this is a TEC 12706. This is a, sorry, that's a TES, not a TEC. This is a TEC 12726. So, let's have a look at these numbers after my beer. TE stands for Thermoelectric. That's the underlying principle. Now, it's a bit like a Stirling engine. A Stirling engine uses a heat differential to create electricity, essentially, or to create some sort of output force. This, you put force in the form of current, electricity, voltage and current, and it creates a temperature differential output. Now, with this one, TEC 127-26, you can actually see it here, if I take it out, written on the front, upside down. So TE, Thermoelectric. C is pretty standard. I reckon it's Thermoelectric couple, but C is the standard size, and then TES is the smaller ones, which might be 30 or 40 mil on each side. 1 is how many stages. It is a single stage. You get bigger industrial ones, or more expensive ones that have more numbers there. 127 is the number of pellets in there, from what I understand, or the number of couplings in there. 127 is pretty much stock standard. And lastly, you have 26. That's the number of amps it's going to draw. Now, most of these standard, like little $20, $30, $50 ones, I'll put some links below to them. They're all 12 volt. If you start getting bundles of them or multiple stages, they might be higher voltage, but 12 volts drawing 26 amps, I'm pretty happy with that. It's going to be about 300 watt. From memory, this is a 12 volt drawing 6 amps, so that's going to be, what's that in my head? That's going to be about 100 watt. They are very useful. They are very limited. They are also ceramic, so if you drop them, they break, and these little wire legs, or especially on these ones, as you can see, snap off quite easily. This one is on its kind of last hope. If you peel the silicon out from the side, you can actually see all the little couplings in there. So if I remember when I'm editing this, if I bother editing it, I'll put a picture somewhere up there so you can see what the little pellets actually look like. But the important thing is it will take temperature from one side and emit it out the other, whichever way you want to think about that. Now I have here my FLIR thermal camera, which I'm probably going to cut to about here, which can show us the temperatures going on. So if I mount this back in here and we roughly point it in front of the camera, it is a standard 20 degrees. Like the warmest part, if I put my hand there, my hand's the warmest thing by far, but you can probably see in the footage, you know what, I wasn't recording, so I'm not going to cut to that. I'm going to start recording now on the FLIR thermal camera, and everything around here is about 20 degrees except for my hands, which are 35, 36 degrees as you'd expect. Now what I've got is my Chinesey thing here, which I'm just going to, my power supply, I'm going to drop this back down to 12 volts. These will take up to about 15 volts before they have a problem. They can be damaged. Look, if you want to cool something, you're going to need some heat sinking on the other side. So back on my first channel, and there'll be a link there if I remember, otherwise a link below. I did a shorts years ago, and I had it submerged in water with a heat sink, and it was sitting on top of that. And through that, I managed to drop a little bit of water on top, and that water froze to a solid pellet in a number of seconds because it had all of that water and heat sink underneath to dissipate that heat. The heat in that water that was extracted by the module had to go somewhere. So again, these aren't creating anything that's not there. They are moving heat around, and that's what we're going to see. So now that this is recording, I'm going to make sure that this is nice and close. You can see it from there in case it blows up too. I'm going to put some current in it by means of this. We'll see what it draws and how much heat it creates, and it might even blow up. Alright, so that's instantly dropped the voltage down, and it's drawing about 6 amps, and it is getting hot quick. So one side is 10 or 9 degrees, one side's up to 60 degrees. Now that it's pretty much up to spec, 70 degrees, 80 degrees. Alright, that's getting uncomfortably hot, 100 degrees. I don't want ceramic exploding in here. That actually started to scare me a little bit, but it's creating a temperature differential. So we can see this side, bit warm. Oh, that side's warm too. That side's warm too now that I'm not powering. So let's give that another quick brap and see what happens. Alrighty. We're seeing this side is getting pretty toasty, up in the 100 degrees. This side is definitely cooling down. Now without any heat sinking, the ceramic itself is an insulator, but there's going to be a lot of heat around it. So if we take that off, let's get some heat sinks attached to this, try it again, and you'll see what sort of temperature differential or what sort of numbers we're looking at here. Alrighty, trust me to plan ahead or not. I don't have any of my big heat sinks out here. I thought I'll come out, I'll bring the good camera out, film a thing that involves heat. So I ripped a heatsink out of whatever that was, an old router, and cut it in half, essentially to give us something. We've got some Arctic silver here, I think it is, sucked back up into that tube, or at least some thermal paste, and we've got a clamp. So what we're going to do is get this lined up. I've basically just tore this in half with the angle grinder really badly. You want to be careful not to get any of those sharp, jaggedy edges on the ceramic, because remember, ceramic is very brittle, that will break quickly. I'm going to stick some of this thermal paste on. I'm going to go hefty because I want to make sure there is good contact. Now when you're doing this, you want to apply it properly and make sure that it's smooth, that you're not rushing, that you get good contact across the entire surface, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So now we have that nice little sandwich. I'm going to go and stick that in there and lift it just off the ground so I don't melt my desk. I don't mind if I melt these little grips, but I don't want to melt my desk. Now that probably needs another little set of grips, but that will be good enough for demonstration purposes, I think. Essentially, there's going to be a hot side and a cold side. Now, when you look at the spec sheets for these, you'll typically see a delta value, or the little triangle symbol, and a temperature, hopefully in the right units. Some might be in freedom units in Fahrenheit, but I think all the ones I've seen are in metric. That is essentially if this thing has the best heat dissipation you can give it, in my understanding, I could be wrong, and you give it the maximum amount of current that it needs to draw, that's the maximum differential you're going to get. So for example, if it is 40 degrees and it has a delta of 25 degrees at 6 amps, that means if it draws 6 amps and you're wicking away all of the heat from the hot side, that's how much it's going to lower the ambient temperature by. That being said, if you are wicking away the temperature to somewhere outside, like that's the way, again, your heat pump, your reverse cycle aircon works. If you're wicking it between two different atmospheres, then you're going to get a differential against that atmosphere, not necessarily your internal atmosphere. I hope that makes sense. I haven't explained it really well, but you can only change the temperature by a certain amount subject to the relative temperature around us. Thus, coolers, not refrigerators. That was a really bad explanation, and I feel terrible for that. But I really can't be buggered. I'm trying not to even swear on YouTube anymore. Explaining it any better. Now, also realize that I stitched myself up a little bit before saying, don't leave me comments asking for this or buying this. So if you haven't already, you're probably going to leave me a comment asking me to build you something. If you come up with a comment that's good enough, I'll pin it to the top so other people can make fun of you, or I don't know. I forgot how YouTube works. Don't tell people not to do things because 100 extra people will do it instead of 100 times as many people. So what we're going to look at now, I will go back to my phone over here, turn the FLIR camera back on, and we'll start recording both. And I'll probably put the FLIR camera up in this area because it's not as high resolution as this 4K recording we're doing here. But we'll be able to see a really good practical example of what's going on. Now this is still hot, it's sitting about 40 recording. So it's still hot. This is sitting at about 33, 34 degrees from the angle grinder, just shredding through it. We got this set to, you can't quite see that, 12.2 volts. Can I pull that forward a bit? There we go. 12.2 volts with one of those cables in the way. I don't really want to unplug that, so that'll do. And I think this draws 26 amps. However, I have seen some spec sheets where 2.6 doesn't mean 26 amps. It means something else, and then 6 amps. I forget now. I don't know what it'll draw, and we'll try both. But first of all, we've got the camera going. Let's give this some current, see what it draws, and see how hot it gets. There we go. She is off to the races, drawing 5 amps. The voltage has dropped very quickly then, and it's ramping its way back up as it catches up. But we can see there is a temperature differential appearing very quickly. Try and line this up nicely with the camera. So that is quite clearly the cold side. It isn't very cold, it's trying to pull it below ambient. So ambient temperature in here right now says it is almost 21 degrees. If we check my little Bunnings doohickey, just getting it down there in about the 10 degree range. I don't know why it's saying the coldest, it's getting distracted, isn't it? About 16 degrees. This side though is quite hot. That's about, wow, right at the top there's quite hot too. 140 degrees. So we've got a temperature differential of 140 down to almost 5 degrees there, and it's pulling about 4 amps now. And the amps are dropping as it's able to create less of a differential. Also got to be careful not to short those, but you get the idea. There is a temperature gradient between the two sides, which is very, very clearly outlined there. Now we have this really hot line because I'm not wicking all of that heat away so quickly, and obviously the heat's going to go to where there's less resistance like everything does. Drew about 6 amps, so I'm probably right about that spec sheet, but it's creating 150 degrees on one side. That's probably the FLIR camera maxed out, and the other side's between 5 and 10 degrees depending on who you ask. So you can use it to keep stuff cool or to cool things to a degree, but not a huge amount. Now let's unclip this and let's switch over to the small one, see what we can get out of that. In the meantime, I will bring this back down to temperature and we'll start the whole thing again. So we're not starting with this hot crap that I don't want to touch now. So I've got these cooled back down to a reasonable temperature, and I thought before we actually test this one out, I'd kind of show you a little bit of the opposite effect. Like I was talking about before with the thermoelectric effect, the temperature differential between the two sides of the pellets or the couplings within them creates some voltage. You can see here, very, very tiny amount of voltage. Now this isn't also the best example because it's only showing you the voltage that's being output. This will only sink so much current, so it's not the best example. You can see it's sitting around 4. That's going to be the temperature differential between the two surfaces, and even if I touch it for a second, that changes very, very quickly and back down. So If I actually put my hand on there and it starts warming up on the surface, you can see that temperature differential actually just keeps creeping up. It doesn't get too high, my hand's not very hot, but it does create a temperature differential, and if I leave it, it settles back down around to that 4 mark. So I'll also give it a quick brap with this and we'll see what happens. Woohoo! Alright, we saw a lot of voltage come out of that. I'm not sure if you saw what happened there. In fact, we can probably even accelerate or accentuate it if we sit this on top, but it definitely knew about it. Alright, we're getting up towards volts there. Alright, we've got half a volt. And that is just created by the temperature differential between the heat on this side and the ambient below. I'm really messing this whole thing up. See, if we take that away, it's going to drop very quickly. So if we put the cold side on something that can wick that away, and put the hot side back on top, whoo, that is definitely warm. Make sure it's pressed down, give it a bit more of a differential. We got 1.5 volts straight out of that there. That's going to be enough to even light an LED. Let's see if we can do that. Have I got an LED, just a random LED around here? One sec. We've got a little 3mm red LED in line here. The reason I chose red is because my understanding is it doesn't draw very much current. And I've just put a wet cloth under the cold side of this to try to wick some of that heat away from it. And as you can see, just from doing that, it's actually already outputting a bit more voltage. So I'm going to give it a blast on the top. We'll see if we can light this LED up, see what voltage we can get it up to. I think these LEDs want about 2.1, 2.2 volts from memory. They'll probably sink 20 milliamps, maybe a bit more, but we should be able to see it. So let's give this a crack. Alright, 1.6 volts, and that is definitely lit up. It might be a bit hard to see there on the camera, but there is definitely some light coming out of that little LED. That is very hard to see on the camera. See if we can get a bit more voltage out of this. Will it create many volts? Alright, about to crack 2 volts there. You can see it clear as day now. I'm going to turn this big light off. That LED is glowing. Whoop. So that is the thermoelectric effect. We are putting a temperature differential in. The differential, which according to my FLIR camera, as you can see, is really confusing. But apparently it's 150 degrees on top and it thinks it's negative. I guess, yeah, it is trying. I don't know what's going on. I don't fully understand the FLIR. Maybe it's 20 degrees less, but it's creating voltage, it's powering this. We can then, of course, do the opposite. We can create... Well, we're not going to now. I did. That's hot. Lesson for future me. That sizzling sound is how much heat was stored in this. So, there's also a safety lesson there. These things get stupid hot. They're ceramic, so they're brittle. They get stupid hot. You're going to be pulling a fair bit of current. Even if the volts aren't high, current can hurt you. So be very aware of that, especially if you accidentally deal with AC voltage. But also just don't burn yourself. I just burnt my thumb a little bit. It's not too bad. I've got a pretty quick response to burning myself because I do it so often. But we've got a good idea then of how hot these things get. It's still over 100 degrees. That's, yeah, even that cloth's hot. They create power, but they also put out power. And, sorry, they create power, but they also absorb power. Typically, these aren't great at absorbing or putting out power. They're designed to create a temperature differential. There are other mechanisms out there if you want to get power from a temperature differential. What we'll do now, though, to finish this off, is move the hot stuff out the way, and I'll just scrape the side off this so you can actually see how it works. I might even be able to reattach that wire on the inside. I'm not too sure, but it should give you a better understanding of what's going on in there. Alrighty, it's cleaned up enough for me. I'm still going to be getting silver everywhere, but let's get into this and have a look. So it is just silicon that they use to seal these. Should be able to just slice it down the side. Again, be safe. This isn't really how you use a hobby knife, but I was hoping to just get that edge up and then peel it away. There we go. Starting to get into it. That's what I wanted. Alright, we don't actually have too much along that side. Let's try another one. My understanding is this is just to keep moisture out, because that would have quite an adverse effect on how these things actually work. No, alright, so we can't see as much as I would have wanted to, but you get a bit of an idea. Can I bring that focus all the way up here? Yeah. What if we try to separate some of the ceramic? Is that gonna... Oh, that is a strong ceramic. I guess the best reference is going to be that picture that I put in of what the little junctions look like. Because this is just that dense, or filled with carbon or something. That really does look like carbon, doesn't it? That's not giving us much information. So I might go take this over to the other bench and see if I can find a way to reattach this cathode here, which... Oh yeah, there's enough there to reattach it to. I hope that gave you some understanding of how these awesome little devices work. There's my other one. There is a bit of focus, and everything in here is pretty hot at the moment. So they are useful. They serve me in a variety of applications, from simply keeping certain things cool to measuring a temperature differential between two environments to simply creating YouTube videos. But they don't refrigerate. They aren't, these aren't meant for a commercial scale. They aren't a cost-effective way to cool things or to refrigerate things. They're a heat pump. Use them as they're intended. Don't ask stupid questions. I'm going to stop responding. But I hope either way you learned something. If you do have genuine questions, or if I got something wrong, by all means, let me know in the comments below. I hope you like this. Hope you subscribe. I'm almost done with making YouTube videos, I think, because it really is a pain in the ass. I've got that much other shit going on. But I'll do a few more, and I'll see you guys around. Take it easy. On a side note right now, if this is recording my audio, these flow cameras need to calm down. Like, I don't know, show multiple points or move smoothly, because I can't read anything going on there. Now, if I blink fast enough, I don't know, 20 to 22 degrees, but seriously, you need a bit of a human aspect to this so it can be understood.